Okay, so I gotta ask you just because I also write comics. I write for Tango Comics, so I'm a huge nerd when it comes to that. Primarily a big Silver Age nerd, and I love Spider-Man as well. So I gotta ask you, which artist did you
Yeah.
like or did you prefer, John Romita Sr. or Steve Ditko?
Uh, no question. Steve Ditko.
Oh yes,
He's the
oh,
one that made he's the one that made the character up. He's the one that designed that costume. Now I think that John Romita Sr. did a really good job when he took over,
oh yeah,
but he didn't draw Spider-Man as good as Ditko did. What he did do is he drew the girls much better. Ditko wasn't really very good with the regular characters, but boy, his Spider-Man was so spidery and just loose, and so he was terrific. And uh, I guess it was about 2 years ago. I was at the New York Comic Con, and I went down to his studio and waited for him to come out of the elevator
really?
and introduced myself to him. And we talked for like maybe 5 minutes. But I just told him, I said, look, Mr. Ditko, I had this incredible animation career, and it's all because of Spider Man. That's what made me want to draw. So he was like, well, I had influences in me when I was a kid. So I understand exactly what you're saying. And he said, I'm so glad that I was your inspiration. And he shook my hand. And then he was heading out to breakfast. And I said, hey, can I treat you to breakfast? And he goes, no, thank you. He turns and walks off. But
Oh,
I had to meet him because I've met Stan Lee many, many times. And I worked with Jack Kirby on Thundar the Barbarian. And those were really the three guys that really influenced my career more than anybody else. But being that it was Spider Man, I said, man, I have got to meet Steve Ditko. I know you're never going to see him at Comic Con.
yeah.
And so I forced myself to go there. And then I talked to the people down in the lobby. And I said, this is what I'm going to do. I said, I don't want to, what do you think? Is he going to get mad at me or anything like that? And they said, no, 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 he's not going to get mad at you. I didn't really believe him. So I talked to Neil Adams the night before. And he said, no, no. He said, Steve is a really nice man. He says, you're not going to get him mad. Because the last thing I wanted to do was go down and get him mad at me and have him yelling at me as I as I walk away.
Yeah.
And and the guys in the lobby said, yeah, he's really quiet. And we didn't even realize he was as involved with Spider-Man as he was. But we'll let you, go ahead. You just stay in the lobby until he comes down. So, it was a dream come true. And then later on, I went out and bought on eBay. Somebody had written him a letter, and it's just funny because he would write back saying, I can't autograph anything for anybody because if I do, I have to do it for everybody.
Right.
Regards, Steve Ditko, and he signs the letter. So, and
Oh,
what's funny is not only does he sign the letter, but he does it in handwriting, and you can read it really good. His handwriting is really good, but underneath he prints Steve Ditko, like as if you couldn't read it.
yeah, yeah.
So you get like two autographs, for nothing, and yet he's telling you he can't autograph anything. So I bought one of those. It cost me like $300, but I said I don't care. I've got to have it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing I loved about Steve Ditko is he always had those really big panels that were just action packed, and the way he would bring flow to a page and how the
Oh,
panels moved. I mean, he would almost, the way he would angle those panels, it almost gave you like a 360 shot of the entire area that they were in. So, like, it really filled up space in your mind.
yeah. And if you ever saw the Amazing Spider-Man annual #1, where he has each one of the Sinister Six gets a big splash page,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and those are just the nicest drawings that like he's ever done. I mean, they're just beautiful. And like I said, I think that he wasn't technically as good as John Romita Sr. He was so good at attitude and angle that his Spider-Man was just untouchable, and nobody can do Spider-Man as good as it was done back then.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I don't know, I feel like, when Ditko was drawing Spider-Man, it was the exact art style that you needed when you were launching that book because it was
Yeah,
big, it was bold, it was different. And by the time Romita came around, I mean, the book had just progressed, right? It was more focused on characters, it was more focused on, themes,
yeah,
relationships, so his style just fit better with that incarnation of Spider-Man or
yeah,
what the series would
yeah. Well,
progress in.
he's supposed to be a gangly teenager, and when Ramita took over, he made him look too much like he's a really well fit man.
Yeah.
He's supposed to be kind of skinny and a
Yeah,
bookworm,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's what he looked like when Ditko did him. Even in his uniform, he looked like that. But Ditko, the reason that because I didn't think anybody could replace Ditko, and I think Ramita did a really good job. I mean, really, if you had to have somebody come on behind him, and the reason he did is exactly like you said, it became more focused on some of the girls that he was dating.
Hmm.
And of course, his Mary Jane and his Gwen Stacy were just beautiful.
Yeah, his Gwen Stacy was phenomenal. I love those. I,
Oh
I love the
gosh, I
highlights
mean,
on the eyes. Just made him
yeah,
pop.
yeah. Since he had worked in romance comics, he was really good at drawing beautiful women. And Ditko's women just weren't beautiful. They just weren't. Even the ones that he took his time to draw,
Yeah.
they just weren't beautiful. But the difference is that Stan Lee gave Spider-Man to Kirby, and Kirby came back, and it looks like Kirby, and that doesn't look like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So he said, Stan was smart enough to realize, no, we need a different style for this. All the books, Avengers, Fantastic Four, everything looks like Kirby, but Spider-Man was different, and it had to look different. And I mean, it was the perfect pick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I don't know, Spider Man, I mean, there's a reason why he is the most recognizable and still, merchandising wise, the most popular superhero is that because he's just so relatable, right? He's
Yeah,
always the down and out guy. He's always the person we want to be because no matter how he messes up his relationships, no matter, what date he misses, what rent check bounces, whatever the case may be, he's always going to face that adversity with a sense of courage and he's always going to do the right
yeah,
thing even if it's sacrificing what he wants the most.
yeah. And for me, I was a little, 8 or 9 year old kid that was very shy, and could
Same.
never talk to girls in my class. And so, I mean, it just completely related with me. And so I just fell in love with it. And, I loved all the Marvel comics. I was a DC fan up until Marvel came out. And then I saw how much better Marvel was written than DC. Everything was kind of funky in DC,
Yeah.
uh, the imaginary stories of Superman and Lois is always, oh, look, Superman turned into a lion. It was just kind of like more fantasy stuff and not really realistic. And all of a sudden, you've got Spider-Man, and he's living in Queens, and he's swinging across the Triborough Bridge in New York. And I grew up in New York, so I knew all of these places that he was
Yeah.
going to. And so it was just so much more relatable. I've never been to Metropolis, and I've never seen Gotham City, but I know New York. And so Marvel really, really did it for me. And of course, it became just huge. I mean, it just blew DC out of the water once they could use, because DC was the owner of the company that was distributing the comics to stores.
Hmm.
So they would only allow Marvel to have 8 comics per month.
Really?
Yeah, they would limit them,
I did
and it was
not know that.
yeah, yeah. So finally, what happened was DC got sold, and they sold their distributorship, and that's when all of a sudden Marvel went out and they started putting out like 30 titles because they could finally compete.
Yeah.
But it's hard to compete when you can only have 8 titles.